All right, let's check in and see what needs to be heard at this time. You're going to overcome detaching from a toxic environment. And this has to do with you having a long-term vision. This ain't something, I feel like I said this in a different reading. This isn't something where it's like you make an impulsive decision. This is you making a decision based on having a long-term vision. And by you doing so, you will overcome this. You will overcome detaching from this toxic environment and transition into having new beginnings because of you shedding the old. The long-term vision that you're needing to have, though, is because I feel like you stuck around too long in this toxic environment because of the growth and the teamwork that you wanted to have. But you're needing to trust your inner wisdom and the long-term vision that you have for yourself, and see that this is not something that you can have being in a toxic environment like this. It's something that may even lead to legal disputes. Another way you're going to overcome this is because you're going to gain a new perspective. By you gaining a new perspective, being patient, I feel like the patience that you have will help you gain a new perspective. Because what I'm feeling like is like if you always arguing back and forth with somebody, you can't really see something for what it really is. But if you're the person that have the patience, you can gain a new perspective and see things differently because you're taking yourself out of the equation rather than being a part of it. Because this is you letting go of control. Because I feel like anytime you're arguing with someone, it's because you're trying to be in control of something, trying to have control. It's a difference when it comes to trying to work things out, talk things out, and get an understanding versus arguing. Because what I'm feeling and hearing is just like a whole lot of, I don't really hear words, but it's like the energy I'm feeling is argumentative. It's arguing. And you're surrendering to this and pausing how you would usually react to certain situations. It's going to allow you to gain a new perspective. I feel before you actually reach that place, though, you may be in a place of just contemplation because you're so used of the toxic environment that you're in that you're going to want to react the way that you usually would react. But there's a need for you to pause so that you can gain a new perspective around this. What I say, we're letting go right here. Yeah, we're letting go right here so you can gain a new perspective around this situation. Because it's times where you have found yourself in self-doubt, and that's what happens. Like, I almost feel like crying, like my eyes is getting watery. That's what happens when you are going back and forth arguing with a person. You end up doubting yourself about what took place, how it happened, why it happened. But by you not participating and letting go of control, you're going to see things for exactly what it is. And that's how you're going to overcome. And it's going to lead you to a rebirth because you're going to be able to leave behind the old limitations that you had on yourself. and forgiving yourself of your past mistakes, and even forgiving someone else or others that was involved in this toxic environment, and releasing the emotional baggage that you gained from there. And that's the perspective that you're going to get, is realizing that that environment only weighed you down. And it's time for you to shed the old, so that you can have this rebirth for yourself. Because at one time you wasn't seeing things, you weren't seeing the truth in things. Because it was too much self-doubt. It was too much self-doubt. And then not only that, also, it was like you could have felt like your transformation, this transition that you want for yourself, this new beginning and the rebirth that you've been wanting for yourself, been blocked. That's also the perspective that you would gain, is realizing that the environment that you're in is actually keeping you blocked, or has been keeping you blocked from the transformation that you've been wanting, because it's affecting your personal development. How can you develop and you're in a toxic environment? You're not going to be able to. So that's going to keep you stagnant, and it's going to hold back when it comes to what it is that you're trying to accomplish for yourself, because you're too distracted. And it affected you, or it will affect you, or has affected you when it comes to the changes that you've been trying to make about yourself or with yourself. It affected your finances. It affected you also having success around things. I feel like these are things at one point you ignored because of being in self-doubt, because of also being a part of the toxicity, that you didn't see things for what it was. You wasn't being truthful about what it is that was taking place in the environment that you were in. This is something that stunted your personal growth. And I feel like this is something that also, like, where you didn't feel like you were being given the divine support that you may have been given previous to being involved in this type of toxicity. This is something that had your emotions just like irregulated emotions, because it was so toxic, to where it's times to where there's love, it feels like actual genuine relationships and family, because this doesn't have to be just romantic. This can be with family. This can be with just relationships in general. It doesn't have to be just romantic. But this is something that had an imbalance, and something that you tried to ignore. And that's because at one point in time you didn't know the things that you will know, or you grew to know, because of you being focused on how things should be in relationships or with family. You know how some people feel like, hell, it's okay for family to have all these fallouts and all this and that, because they family and family first. You know, that type of concept. Or feeling like in relationships, you know, people go through things and it ain't always that tight. And that is what kept you stuck. And this toxicity is because of looking at things from that type of expression. But there's going to come a time, if it hasn't already, to where you're no longer going to look at things like that. Instead, you're going to look at it for exactly what it is. And that self-doubt is you choosing also to cling on to the past or go on with your future. You could be a fire sign, but you don't have to be. You find yourself at times where it's just like you're in this illusion. You're fearful about what will take place once you overcome this. But this is the same environment that had you in anxiety. Your intuition been telling you things. You could have been shown things in dreams, how someone or people were moving in a deception type of energy. The fear is also of you just overcoming, but you're overcoming. And there's a need for you to overcome the fear. It's things, it's truths that you weren't trying to see. But I feel like at some point, if not already, those truths are being uncovered. And there's going to come a time to where you're going to be releasing the repressed emotions that you've been holding on to. This toxic environment had you in mental confusion. And that mental confusion is going to lift. Because this is something that you're going to overcome. It was a struggle for you to release this type of stress because of what all you've been through. And really having self-doubt about whether the hard work will be worth it or not. Whether you can actually build a stable foundation for your future or not. It was too much of mental confusion happening to where, excuse me, you weren't taking the necessary action. This most definitely could be a fire sign. You was not taking the necessary action to work towards this. And instead, you chose to remain in this toxic environment. Because a part of you wanted to seek the inner truth, but you knew with seeking the inner truth, it would mean that you should do what's best for you. And that's something that you weren't meant to do at a particular time because you weren't seeing things a certain way. You didn't have the perspective that you are gaining. To step back from the chaos, or to even realize that you are in the chaos yourself. It was too much concern of how others see you and not how you see yourself. And that also was the struggle when it comes to you recovering and you rebuilding from this toxicity. It messed with your determination. You could have been in periods of just feeling unmotivated, depressed. Wanting to end this situation. And you may have ended this situation just to return right back to it. Because even though you know that there's not the stability that you're wanting, or not being able to manifest your goals and have the discipline or even the motivation, this is something that you still went back to. Because to you it felt like it was some sense of stability there. even through the chaos and the toxicity. But this affected you. Earth sign is out here as well. But you don't have to be an earth sign. This affected your finances. This affected how you showed up for yourself. Whether you really wanted to pursue. This is someone that could have wanted to pursue a career, but because you didn't show up for yourself in a way that you should have, because of not being determined, not having that motivation, and maybe being in the depressed state, that you didn't handle your business all the way through. And I say all the way through because I just feel like it's times to where you handle your business when you do have that bit of motivation, but it's other times where you don't have that. So you slack on taking care of your business. You slack on working towards your goals and having the success outcome that you want for yourself. I feel like you dealt with so much of this toxicity and chaos is because of you feeling like it was some type of deep soul connection or connections that you had with people. But you come to realize that that was not the case. You could have felt like you would have a certain outcome, and the outcome that you thought that you would have is not the outcome that is going to be. And I feel like that at one point was your hopes and your fears, is realizing that this is something that you will have to overcome. And at one point, this is not something that you wanted to overcome, because your hopes was to have teamwork and to have growth together. Meanwhile, your fears was to overcome this all on your own. But I feel like this is the time that you will overcome and transition into this new beginning after shedding all of this old toxicity and this chaos that you've been dealing with.